The steam from the espresso machine had kissed Anne Moreau's cheek for the 1000th time that morning when she noticed him watching her again through the rain-streaked window of Café Luna. London's drizzle painted watercolor streaks across the glass, but his piercing gray eyes remained fixed on her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Benedict Rhodes, though she didn't note his name, yet sat in the corner booth like he owned the place, which, given his Savile Row suit and Italian leather shoes, he probably could. His fingers drummed against the marble tabletop in a rhythm that suggested impatience, but not with the service, with something else entirely. "Table 6 wants another Americano," called Marcus from behind the counter, jolting Anne from her observation. She grabbed the steaming cup, weaving between tables packed with the usual morning crowd of students, freelancers, and tourists seeking refuge from London's perpetual mist. "Here you go," she said, setting the cup down without meeting those unsettling eyes. The man's presence had become a fixture over the past 3 weeks. Always the same booth, always the same order, always that same calculating stare that made her feel like a specimen under glass. "Thank you, Anne." His voice carried the kind of educated accent that belonged in boardrooms and country estates, not cramped cafes in Bloomsbury. She froze. The name tag on her apron only read a small rebellion against customers who assumed familiarity bought them the right to her personal space. Your father's debts are mounting." The statement hit her like cold water. Benedict's expression remained neutral, but his words carried the weight of someone who knew exactly how much she owed and to whom. £47,000 to Vincent Costello's organization. The interest compounds weekly. Anne's blood turned to ice. Vincent Costello wasn't the kind of man whose name got thrown around lightly in polite conversation. The fact that this stranger knew about her father's gambling debts meant he was either incredibly well-informed or incredibly dangerous, possibly both. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no other customers could hear. The last thing she needed was words spreading about her family's financial catastrophe. "Your father borrowed money to keep this place afloat after your mother's medical bills consumed your savings." Benedict's tone remained conversational, but each word felt like a scalpel cutting through her carefully constructed facade. "He's been making minimum payments for 8 months, but Costello's patience has limits. I'd estimate you have perhaps 2 weeks before he decides to collect through alternative methods." The coffee cup in Anne's hand trembled. She'd been working 3 jobs, waitressing at the cafe, bartending at night, and cleaning offices before dawn just to keep the debt collectors from her door. But it was never enough. The interest alone consumed most of her earnings, leaving barely enough for food and rent. "What do you want?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Benedict smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. Gone was the cold businessman. In his place sat someone who looked almost boyish despite the expensive suit. "I want to help you. More specifically, I want to offer you a job. I already have 3 jobs. This one would replace all 3. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. The paper felt heavy between her fingers, embossed with gold lettering that read Rhodes International Holdings. Below it, in smaller font, Benedict Rhodes, Chief Executive Officer. Anne nearly dropped the card. Rhodes International was one of London's largest investment firms. She'd seen their name in the financial section of newspapers, always accompanied by numbers that seemed too large to be real. "I need a wife," Benedict continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Not for love, not for companionship, but for business. A marriage of convenience that would last exactly 1 year. In exchange, I would pay off your father's debts in full, provide you with a generous monthly allowance, and ensure you never have to worry about Vincent Costello again." The cafe seemed to fade around them. Anne was dimly aware of other customers chatting, the espresso machine hissing, Marcus calling out orders, but all of it felt distant and muffled. This couldn't be real. Men like Benedict Rhodes didn't marry waitresses, especially not for business reasons. "You're insane," she breathed. "I'm desperate," he corrected. "There's a difference." 3 days later, Anne found herself in Benedict's penthouse apartment in Canary Wharf, staring out at the Thames while he explained the intricacies of corporate mergers and hostile takeovers. The view from his floor-to-ceiling windows made London look like a toy city, all glittering lights and miniature buildings stretching toward the horizon. "My grandfather built Rhodes International from nothing," Benedict said, pouring wine into 2 glasses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "But he made the company dependent on the Hartwell Group for our largest contracts. Now James Hartwell is retiring, and his daughter Charlotte is taking over." And they accepted the wine gratefully. The Bordeaux tasted like liquid velvet, nothing like the house wine she occasionally splurged on. "And Charlotte Hartwell wants to marry you. Charlotte Hartwell wants to merge our companies. The marriage is just her father's condition. He's old-fashioned about keeping business in the family." Benedict's jaw tightened. "If I don't marry her within 6 months, they'll take their contracts elsewhere. Without those contracts, Rhodes International will lose 60% of its revenue within 2 years. So marry her." The words tasted bitter in Anaise's mouth, though she couldn't quite identify why. "I've tried that approach. Charlotte and we bring out the worst in each other. She's brilliant, ruthless, and completely unsuited to be anyone's wife, especially mine. We had dinner last week and ended up throwing bread rolls at each other in a 5-star restaurant. Despite everything," Anai laughed, the image of Benedict Rhodes, billionaire CEO, engaging in a food fight was absurdly endearing. "But if I'm already married," Benedict continued, "the merger becomes impossible. Charlotte would have to find another way to structure the deal, probably involving stock options and board positions instead of matrimony. It's messier for them, but it keeps both companies independent. And after a year, we divorce quietly. You walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you choose. I retain control of my company without sacrificing my sanity to an incompatible marriage." It sounded too simple, too clean, and they had learned the hard way that nothing in life was ever that straightforward. "What's the catch?" Benedict's smile turned rueful. "We'd have to make it convincing. Public appearances, social events, living together. To the outside world, we'd need to appear as a genuine couple, living together." Anaise's pulse quickened. "Separate bedrooms, of course, but yes, you'd move in here. The press would be watching, especially once the engagement is announced. Any sign that our relationship is fake would expose the entire arrangement." Anai wandered to the windows, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Below, the city pulsed, with life, millions of people living their real lives, pursuing real dreams, forming real relationships. What Benedict proposed felt like stepping into a movie, complete with scripted romance and predetermined ending. "Why me?" she asked. "You must know dozens of women who'd be more suitable. Models, socialites, other business people. Because you need the money, which means you have incentive to make it work. Because you're not from my world, which makes the relationship seem genuine rather than calculated. And because," he paused, joining her at the window, "because when I watch you work, you treat every customer like they matter, even the rude ones, even me. When I was just a stranger taking up space in your cafe, their reflection in the glass showed to people from completely different worlds him in his tailored suit, her in jeans and a sweater she'd owned for 5 years. Yet something about the image looked right, like puzzle pieces that shouldn't fit but somehow did. The contract would protect both of us," Benedict added. "Clear boundaries, define expectations, legal safeguards, nothing left to chance or emotion." But as Anai turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability hidden beneath his confident exterior, she wondered if emotion was something that could really be contracted away. The way he'd looked at her in the cafe hadn't been calculating, it had been hopeful, almost desperate. And the way her heart raced when he stood this close had nothing to do with money or debt relief. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course." "But Anai," Benedict caught her hand as she moved toward the door. His touch was warm, gentle, and entirely too familiar for 2 people who'd known each other less than a week. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know that you saved me long before I ever offered to save you. How? You were the first person in months who looked at me and saw just a man, not a net worth or a business opportunity. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" As Anai rode the elevator down from his penthouse, her mind raced with possibilities and consequences. The smart choice was obvious: take his offer, pay off the debts, secure her future. But something about the way Benedict had looked when he'd talked about Charlotte Hartwell, about contracts and mergers and predetermined endings, made her wonder if they were both trying to protect themselves from the wrong things. The wedding was small, elegant, and entirely fake except for the moment when Benedict lifted her veil and his breath caught audibly. Standing in the intimate ceremony room at Chelsea Registry Office, surrounded by his business associates and her few close friends, Anne felt the weight of their arrangement shift into something more complex. "You may kiss the bride," the registrar announced, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. They'd practiced this moment, planned for it. But Benedict's eyes held a question that hadn't been in any of their rehearsals. When his lips touched hers, soft and tentative, Anne understood that some things couldn't be scripted. The kiss lasted exactly long enough to be convincing, and not a second longer. But it left her feeling breathless and unsteady. 2 months into their marriage, the lines Benedict had so carefully drawn began to blur. What started as polite cohabitation evolved into genuine companionship. They developed routines: morning coffee together before he left for the office, late dinners where they talked about everything except their arrangement, quiet evenings when she'd read while he worked, both of them stealing glances when the other wasn't looking. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. Benedict laughed more, the rigid businessman facade giving way to someone warmer and more spontaneous. He'd started leaving little gifts for Anne, books he thought she'd enjoy, flowers from the corner shop, pastries from her favorite bakery. Nothing expensive or romantic, just thoughtful gestures that suggested he'd been paying attention to her preferences. Anne found herself looking forward to his return each evening, timing her own schedule around their shared meals. She'd begun wearing dresses more often, styling her hair with care, applying makeup not for their public appearances, but for quiet moments in their kitchen. When Benedict would pause in reading his newspaper to really look at her, the crisis came on a rainy Thursday in November. Anne returned from grocery shopping to find Benedict pacing their living room, phone pressed to his ear, his voice tight with controlled fury. "No, Charlotte, that's not acceptable, because we had an agreement. I don't care what your lawyers say." The timeline was clearly established. Anne set down the groceries quietly, but Benedict caught her eye and gestured for her to stay. His free hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining as if he needed the anchor of her presence. "Fine, set up the meeting, but this changes nothing about the fundamental structure." He ended the call and pulled Anne into his arms without hesitation, burying his face in her hair. "What happened?" she asked, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. "Charlotte's found out about our arrangement. She's threatening to expose everything unless I agree to new terms. That would essentially give her controlling interest in my company." The words hit Anne like a physical blow. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but she'd allowed herself to forget that their marriage had an expiration date. More dangerous still, she'd allowed herself to imagine that Benedict might want to extend it. What are you going to do?" Benedict pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I'm going to tell her the truth, that we're not really married, that we're not fake married anymore." His thumb traced across her cheekbone. "That's somewhere between your terrible morning hair and the way you hum while cooking dinner. I fell completely, irrevocably in love with my wife." Anne's breath caught. "Benedict, I know this wasn't part of our deal. I know you signed up for 1 year of pretending, not a lifetime of reality. But I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is contractual obligation." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I love the way you argue with the television during period dramas. I love that you put hot sauce on everything, even ice cream that one time. I love that you've never once asked me to buy you anything expensive. But you light up when I bring you those terrible paperback novels from the airport." "The novels aren't terrible," Anne protested weakly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "They're awful and you know it." Benedict's smile was soft, vulnerable, nothing like the confident businessman who'd propositioned her in the cafe. "But you love them, so I love that you love them. I love everything about you, Anne. The question is, do you think you could ever love the real me? Not the billionaire, not the convenient husband, just Benedict." And A thought about the man who'd learned to make her favorite tea exactly how she liked it, who'd rearranged his schedule to drive her to her father's hospital appointments, who'd held her while she cried over her mother's anniversary. She thought about quiet Sunday mornings when he'd abandoned his newspapers to help her attempt French toast, usually burning at least one batch while they got distracted by conversation and gentle touches. "I already do," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you the day you admitted you'd never actually made coffee before. And I caught you Googling how to use espresso machine on your phone." Benedict's laugh was pure joy. "You saw that. I see everything." She rose on her toes, bringing their faces closer together. "I see how you tip the barista extra when you think no one's looking. I see how you call your grandmother every Tuesday. I see how you've been learning to cook because you noticed. I'm tired of takeout. I fell in love with the man who leaves his socks on the bathroom floor and argues with football matches on television." This time when he kissed her, there was nothing tentative about it. It was the kiss of a man claiming his wife, of two people finally admitting that the best things in life couldn't be contracted or negotiated. They could only be felt, chosen, and cherished. When they broke apart, breathless and grinning, Benedict rested his forehead against hers. "So what do we tell Charlotte?" "We tell her the truth, that the fake marriage she's trying to expose became real the moment we stopped trying to protect ourselves from it. And if she doesn't believe us," and A smiled, thinking of all the small intimacies they'd built over months of pretending inside jokes, shared glances, the way they moved around each other in their kitchen like dancers who'd learned each other's steps, "then we'll just have to spend the rest of our lives proving her wrong." 6 months later, they renewed their vows in the same registry office, this time with tears instead of nerves, promises instead of contracts, and a love that had grown from the most unlikely soil, a business arrangement that bloomed into something neither of them had dared to hope for. In a world where relationships are often reduced to transactions and love is treated as a luxury rather than a necessity, can genuine connection still flourish in the most artificial circumstances? And what does it say about us that sometimes the relationships we plan the least become the ones that define us the most?